In this video, I'm going to be painting up this model of the Panzer V, better known as the Panther tank, for bolt action, Konflikt 47, and Warlord Games' latest game, Achtung Panzer. First, you'll have to build up this tank, and I do have a tutorial in the upper right hand corner that will show you how to do this. Over here, with a fully assembled tank, you'll want to just remove the turret and then also the shirts and skirts on the left and on the right. You want to leave these detached while you're painting them. Now, if you look on the internet, there are endless amount of camouflage schemes for German tanks in World War II, specifically for the Panther. But in this case, I'm going to be focusing on this ambush camouflage that they used late war, around 1944. I will do videos on other camouflage schemes in the future, but this is the one I'm going to be focusing on for this video. To start this painting process, I'm going to first prime the entire tank black. You can do this with a rattle can primer, or in my case, I use an airbrush. Either way, it ends up the same way, fully black. Now you want to make sure the entire model is black, including the recesses and so on. So just kind of work your way all around it to make sure that you have full coverage. The next part involves an airbrush. What I do is I use skeleton bone and mix it 50-50 with flow improver, and then just make sure to really mix it up real good so it's fully combined. And then after that, you should be able to shoot this paint out of an airbrush. You'll notice that I'm using a zenithal highlighting method, which means I spray this from a 45-degree angle all the way around, and I do this for the hull as well as the turret and the shirts and skirts. For the bottoms of the model, so that they do not look completely black, you can apply a light dusting of this tan color onto all the undersides like this. And when you're done with this zenithal highlighting process, the models are going to look like this, which they're going to have a brighter top side and then a darker underside. Now you can do this also with a rattle can if you really wanted to. You'll just have to pick a light brown aerosol paint and then just apply it from a zenithal highlighting angle like I showed earlier. Time to apply the rest of the paints. I'm going to be using Brigadine Brown Fanatic paint, and I'm using this on all the tracks. You want to use a nice white brush and then apply it onto the tracks like this. As you've noticed, the tracks are fully assembled. They're actually easier to paint than they look. You just have to have a nice flat brush, and it should be able to get in between the crevices and get this color down onto all the sections that are tracks. Now you want to be able to get the side walls like this, and also finesse your way in between the road wheels without getting them painted with this dark brown color. Now if you do happen to apply some of this color onto the road wheels, don't worry about it. The later colors will cover it up. Besides the tracks, you'll also want to paint these little sections on the sides of the hull. These are also tracks, they're spares, so you want to paint them in the same color. Be sure to paint the top here like this, so none of that light brown skeleton bone color shows through. Of course, there are tracks on both sides of the tank, so make sure to paint both sides in the exact same way. Let's start with the camouflage. I'm going to first use leather brown. This is a nice, rich, and darker brown. And then from here, really camouflaging is all about being random, while also having a sense of pattern to it. I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but if you look here, I try to make the strokes as smooth as possible with connecting lines, so wherever I go from one side of the hull to another, I want to make sure that the camouflage kind of connects, like here. Like if I paint the top, I want to paint the sides of the tank the same way, and then I just keep on going all around with the aim of trying to apply equal amounts of brown all over the tank, so there aren't going to be any areas that look like it's not brown. You want to have equal representation all the way around. I also keep the patterns fairly random. I don't make them look the same anywhere on the tank. The variety is what makes painting camouflage really fun. You'll want to do this on the hull and then also transition to the turret and use the same kind of technique here. Random patterns with some purpose to it, and laid out fairly uniformly, including on the barrel all the way around the tank. Next, you want to transition to the road wheels and do the same thing here. You can see that I'm fairly random with where I apply them, and also the shapes look very different. Some cover more of the road wheel, some cover less, and so on. Camouflage should look as random as the nature around them. Now for the shirts and skirts, you want to just apply them very loosely on the tank. Do not press too hard or else they won't come out. And then connect the brown camouflage that I done on the hull with the shirts and skirts like this. You can see how it kind of relates to each other. So I paint it in the same way, left hand and right hand. Just kind of connecting it like this so it looks like one continuous camouflage pattern like this. It really pulls the whole look of the tank together. After you're done with this step though, be sure to remove the shirts and skirts so you can continue with the next steps. Now I switched to Orc Skin Fanatic paint. You can honestly actually use a slightly darker version of green. However, I wanted my tank to look a little bit brighter on the tabletop, so I used this. But admittedly, you could use a darker shade of green if you really wanted to. Now you'll do the exact same thing with the green as you did with the brown, trying not to overlap the brown too much. You can get close to it, sometimes you can touch it, but don't overlap it. Try to give the green its own time in the sun, so to speak. The process is very similar to the brown. You want to keep the patterns very random, different shapes, different sizes, but also congruent enough all throughout the vehicle so it doesn't look like you missed a spot. You want to make sure that green is applied to as many sides of the vehicle as possible, interweaving in between the browns that you laid down earlier. I'll continue rolling this video so you can see how I applied these patterns, but obviously you do not have to follow this step by step. You can lay it down however you want. As usual, I reapply the shirts and skirts to continue the camouflage pattern in green on those skirts. Once you are done with this green and brown pattern, now it's time to apply the dots for this ambush camouflage using a small detailing brush. And then first starting with leather brown, go into the areas with skeletal bone and apply little tiny dots like I'm showing here. You notice that I'm not very uniform with the size of the dots. Some are big, some are small, really doesn't matter. The most important thing is to not apply too large of a splotch. You want to go medium small to small and then just kind of randomize where they go. Be sure that they're not too orderly or look like they're in some sort of a pattern. They are supposed to be camouflage spots, and camouflage is supposed to be random. Next, I go back to skeleton bone fanatic paint, and this is going to go on all the leather brown areas right here. You'll do the same thing with small and medium small dots on these areas, similar to what you did in the skeleton bone areas before. Next, I use ash gray fanatic paint, and this is going to go on the green areas of the camouflage. Again, applying dots in random patterns in varying different sizes just to give the areas nice variety, completing this really attractive and fun camouflage scheme. Now I'm going to add some depth and glazing to the model by using some soft tone wash. I watered this down about 80% wash, 20% water, and then I apply it onto the tracks, onto the road wheels, and then I also apply a fairly light glaze of this wash all over the model. Watering it down tempers the intensity of the wash, and also it prevents it from pooling in certain areas of the tank and making it look kind of coffee stained. So when you apply it, be sure that it is a nice light glaze. This will do a few things. It will add shadowing to all the crevices and all the panel lines on the tank. And also, it changes the skeleton bone from a fairly light brown to the correct light tan that you see in the painting guide that I showed earlier. It also makes the orc skin green slightly darker, which also better matches the painting guide. And lastly, the wash provides a little bit of weathering to the model as well. Now the next step can be done with decals, but I'm going to be using paints to put on the lettering on the sides of the turret of this tank. I start out with some demonic yellow, and then I freehand in the numbers 2 and then 1 and 1 for the number 211 on the side of the tank. Granted, this is not going to be as clean and as crisp as a decal, but if you do not have decals, which is my case, I actually lost them, you can actually easily freehand it in. You want to do this yellow fairly broad, like I'm showing here, in preparation for the next color. I next use pure red Fanatic paint, and with a slightly smaller detailing brush, I apply the red inside the yellow, but making sure that the yellow outline still remains visible, which means you have to always make sure that the red lines are smaller than the yellow in every single instance. You want to trace in the number 2 and then work your way onto the number 1. And then I also added the little stylistic hook on the top of the 1, like I'm showing here. I do this for all the 3 letters. And then after that, I flip the tank's turret over to the other side and do the same thing on that side. And here are the finished numbers on the turret. Looks pretty snazzy. The last color I'm going to use is Grim Black Speed Paint, and I apply this onto the machine gun on the top of the turret and also in the front area of the hull right here. After everything is dry, I apply 2 coats of matte clear varnish onto all the parts. And once the varnish is dry, I'm going to get the shirts and skirts and I'm going to be putting it on the hull permanently. These fit very easily without glue onto the sides of the hull. You just have to press them in place. They will fit super snug even without glue and will not come out again. The turret is next. You do not have to glue this in place if you really don't want to. I like it loose so I can rotate it. Just put it in the keyway and rotate it into position. Here is the finished Panther, all decked out in ambush camouflage, ready for your next game of Bolt Action, Konflikt 47, or Achtung Panzer. Thank you for watching, and I hope you had as much fun painting up this camouflage scheme as I did, and enjoy using this newly painted Panther on the tabletop. Until next time, take care and happy hobbying.